It's time for Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, inviting the atheist, agnostic, and skeptic to examine for themselves the evidence for the Christian faith. We are all limited by what we do not know and by the things we think we know but are not true. Dr. Joe Mott earned his PhD at LSU and was a distinguished math professor at Florida State University for 38 years, helping to write 3 math textbooks and authoring over 30 research articles in math. He is now the host of this radio program, Defending and Commending the Faith. Here is Joe Mott.
Hello to everyone. Welcome to the program. Followers of Christ are still being called into action for defending and commending the Christian faith. In the last episode, I addressed this question: is the Bible reliable, trustworthy, or free of error? There are 3 types of considerations that must be addressed. First option: the Bible is not trustworthy. This is the skeptic's sweeping rejection of the Bible's trustworthiness. Second option: for 2 centuries, skeptics have claimed that the Bible has real problems in one or more trouble spots, like we do not have the original documents of the New Testament. They claim copiers and translators have introduced errors into the Bible. They also assert that the Bible presents a Jesus that performed miracles, but skeptics like David Hume don't even accept miracles as being possible. Questions are posed concerning the veracity of the Bible regarding the Bible's inspiration and interpretation. Skeptics proclaim there is a conflict between science and the Bible, saying there are contradictions in statements in the Bible. Others assert that the Gospels were not written until late in the 2nd century, well after the events they record. They imply that the Gospels tell the story of Jesus in such a way that the leaders of the early church would buttress their own authority. They also pose questions regarding God's justice and fairness, especially regarding the treatment of Sodom and Gomorrah, or the Canaanites, or the Ninevites. Just because the 4 Gospels give references to the same situation from different perspectives doesn't mean they are wrong. J. Warner Wallace, the former cold case detective in the Los Angeles Police Department, is not disturbed by witnesses giving their own perspectives of a crime, because if all statements were identical, that would imply collusion. The third option is the acknowledgement of the authority and the reliability of the Bible. The Old Testament and New Testament pass the separate historiographical tests like no other ancient books. Most professional archaeologists and historians acknowledge the historicity of the Bible. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 contribute to that confidence. Sir Fredrick Kenyon, who lived from 1863 to 1952 and was the former director and principal librarian of the British Museum, in his book, The Bible and Archaeology, pages 288 and 289, summarizes the situation. The last foundation for any doubt that the Scripture have come down to us substantially as they were written has now been removed. Both the authenticity and the general integrity of the books of the New Testament may be regarded as finally established. In his book, The New Testament Documents, Are They Reliable?, F. Bruce, who served as the Rylands Professor of Religious Criticism and Exegesis at the University of Manchester from 1959 to 1978, writes, "There is no body of ancient literature in the world which enjoys such a wealth of good textual attestation as the New Testament." Professor Bruce further comments, "The evidence for our New Testament writings is ever so much greater than the evidence for many writings of classic authors, the authenticity of which no one dreams of questioning. And if the New Testament were a collection of secular writings, their authenticity would generally be regarded as beyond all doubt." The great Princeton scholar B.B. Warfield says, "The great bulk of the New Testament has been transmitted to us without, or almost without, any variations. It can be asserted with confidence that the sacred text is exact and valid, and that no article of faith and no moral precept in it has been distorted or lost. In the final analysis, the only reason to believe anything is that what it claims is true. Then we can examine things by tests for truth, logical consistency, including coherence of our beliefs to form a systematic whole, empirical adequacy supported by enough data to identify trends, experiential relevance. Thus, in different words, any truth claim can be tested by whether it is rational, factual, and livable. In short, any argument for our belief should be, first, based on the best evidence, second, the argument be valid, and third, refute the strongest objections that can be made. The evidence strongly supports the accuracy of the Bible, but in many cases, the truth has been overlooked or rejected by skeptics because of their philosophical presuppositions that run contrary to the Scriptures, like the philosophy of naturalism. This leads to a double standard. Critics approach secular literature with one standard, but wrongly use a different standard when they examine the Bible. Those who disregard the Bible as historically unreliable must realize that the same standard would force them to eliminate almost all ancient literature of Plato, Aristotle, Homer, Thucydides, etc. Christ cannot be dismissed as a mythical creation of the early church. All the evidence supports the historical reliability of the gospel accounts about Jesus. I have shown J. Warner Wallace's fourfold test for the reliability of witnesses. Additionally, a solid philosophical case can be built for the resurrection, in turn, that authenticates Jesus' divine claims about himself. He said, "I and the Father are one." John chapter 10, verse 30. The word for "are" can indicate that they are one in harmony and agreement in attitude toward the purpose of God. But more than that, we can interpret this passage as saying they are one in nature. God the Father is certainly divine in nature, so then Jesus, the Son of God, is divine in nature as well. And Jesus also said, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." John chapter 14, verse 9. That clearly implies Jesus is divine. Romans chapter 1 verse 4 gives further evidence that Jesus is divine. It affirms that Jesus Christ was declared the Son of God by the resurrection from the dead according to the Spirit of holiness. The passage 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 16 and 17 in the New American Standard Bible says, "All Scripture is inspired by God and is profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be adequate, equipped for every good work." The Greek word for inspired literally is God-breathed. Let me turn now to a story that appears in the book God Breathed by Josh McDowell that will make the case even stronger. Josh McDowell is an American Christian apologist and the author or co-author of more than 150 books. As a guest lecturer, McDowell was speaking in a history class. He began with a bold statement: "I believe there is more evidence for the reliability of the New Testament than for any other 10 pieces of classical literature put together." The professor for the class was seated in the far corner of the room. At the conclusion of McDowell's opening statement, he began to snicker and groan loudly. McDowell decided to confront his obvious objection. McDowell began, "May I ask what you are snickering about?" The professor replied without hesitation, "I can't believe you have the audacity to claim in a history class that the New Testament is reliable." He chuckled then and added, "That's ridiculous." McDowell had heard skeptical statements like this before, so he was prepared. He asked, "Tell me, Professor, as a historian, what tests would you apply to a piece of historical writing to determine its accuracy and reliability?" The entire class turned toward the professor to hear his reply, but he had nothing to say. This is not surprising. Skeptics often make damning comments with amazing bravado, while at the same time not having any backing to prop up their claims. This history professor had a strong opinion that the New Testament was unreliable, yet he had no real evidence to support his view. 2 books and an article relate that the accuracy of biblical documents can be assessed by combining 3 basic tests of historiography that pertain to the reliability of ancient literature. These are McDowell's book, God Breathed, the book A Visual Guide to Biblical Apologetics by Joseph M. Holden and Sarah R. Interline, and the article from Ankerberg Theological Institute by Dr. John Ankerberg and Dr. John Weldon, entitled The Historic Reliability of Scripture, Part 2. The 3 tests are the bibliographical test, the internal test, and the external test. I will discuss these tests in the next episode. For now, allow me to close this episode by reminding you, exercise daily. Walk with God.
Thank you for listening to Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, a production of Wave 94 Radio in Tallahassee, Florida. If you have any questions or comments for Joe, please forward them to Doug Apple at Wave 94 at this email address, dougapple@wave94.com. And be sure to join us every Monday evening at 6:45 p.m. on Wave 94 and subscribe through your favorite podcast app. Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott.